He is the man the nation was waiting for to be arrested, the suspect in the Idaho student's murder case. Now he is in custody, and prosecutors say he is the one responsible for the violent stabbing deaths of Ethan, Xana, Maddie, and Kaylee in Moscow, Idaho. Tonight, we are live from Monroe County, Pennsylvania, where the accused killer made his first court appearance. What did he look like? What did he say? And where will he be next? Plus, we are live in Moscow, Idaho at the Leda County Jail, where the accused killer will be housed pending his trial for 4 counts of first-degree murder. Tonight, full coverage and all the latest information in the Idaho student's murder case. I'm Vinny Politan. Thanks so much for joining us tonight here on Closing Arguments. Great to have you back with us. It's 2023. It's a new year. Now, normally you say Happy New Year, but as we talk about what happened to these Idaho students, I don't think we can say that. I think we just say it's a new year, because for these families, the journey is just beginning. It is just starting out for them. And for them to think of the word happiness this time of year, impossible. Impossible. You've just gone through a holiday season without your son, your daughter, your sister. And now there's an arrest. And we are now in step 1 of the process. Just the first step. We've got an arrest. The defendant has been arrested. The accused is in custody. But those of you who watch Court TV know how long this journey can be and how excruciating it can be for the families involved. Step by step. Obviously, Court TV will be there for every step of this process as we see what happens in the lead up to what will be a huge trial for this accused mass murderer. Now, investigators in Moscow, the police, seem to still be putting things together a little bit. You know, when this arrest broke, we had breaking news here on Court TV, and one of the things that they were saying was, hey, if you have any information about this guy, about this accused killer, please come forward. Please keep providing the tips, keep providing the information. So that tells me they're confident they have the right person, but they know they need to connect everything. Dot the I's and cross the T's. That's the way our system works. It's the only way it works. Justice is not easy. Getting justice is not a guarantee. So for prosecutors and the families, as they work through this difficult system of ours to try to get to that end point where they can finally, if they get the verdict that they want, exhale and turn the page. Turn the page so they don't have to think about, talk about, worry about this killer ever again. But we're not there. We're just in the beginning, and we've got full coverage tonight. We've got Court TV legal correspondent Chanley Painter live in Leda County, Idaho, outside the courthouse and jail where this accused killer will be taken once he's extradited to Idaho. And Court TV legal correspondent Julie Janae is in Monroe County, Pennsylvania, where this accused appeared in court today. And we'll begin with Julie Janae and today's big headline, the hearing. What can you tell us about what happened inside that courtroom in the state of Pennsylvania where they don't like cameras?
They don't like cameras, but they did allow us as the media to be inside to watch this page turn in the process for Bryan Kohberger. He was here, even though we expected that he was going to waive his right to an extradition process and he was going to agree to go to Idaho. This still was about a 20-minute hearing in front of Judge Marguerite Worthington, and she made sure she went through each of the items to make sure that this was a voluntary decision by this suspect. She asked him if he was agreeing to this because he was promised something or because he felt pressured, and whether or not he was satisfied with his representation, he did also confirm that he felt like this was in his best interest to face these charges in Idaho and not fight extradition. He also said that he's not on any medication, didn't have any mental health issues that would prohibit him from making this voluntary decision. But seeing him inside of the courtroom today, a first time for me. Someone who seemed very confident. He kept his posture very erect, head held high when he walked in, and seemed stoic for the most part. But when he locked eyes with his family on that front row of the gallery, that's when you saw the emotion. He did a lot of nodding to the judge when she was asking him those questions, seeming to tell her he understood this, that this is a process that he's been informed of, and he understands where things are going from here. Here's a listen to the district attorney here in Monroe County, who had an idea of why he believes that waiver is coming so quickly from this suspect.
It is a quirk, apparently. It's not in the norm of the states I'm familiar with that Idaho does not release their probable cause affidavit in support of their arrest warrant until after their defendant is returned to that state. But having read those documents and the sealed affidavits of probable cause, I definitely believe that one of the main reasons the defendant chose to waive extradition and hurry his return back to Idaho was the need to know what was in those documents.
And there's a lot of people who wanted to know, needed to know here at the courthouse today. There were cars upon cars of media watching and waiting for what was going to happen. This courtroom sat 200 people, and most of those chairs were filled up today. Here's a look at what it looked like outside today. For most of the day, there was a lot of security that was needed to block off the roads. These officers wanted to make sure that Kohberger was safe coming in and out. They didn't announce exactly how he was going to be getting in, but we did get that video of him arriving at the courthouse today. The same stance that we saw inside of the courtroom, but again, a lot of security both inside of the courtroom, those officers walking around with long guns, but also outside and even on the roofs of some of these buildings, just standing guard here in Strasburg, Pennsylvania.
You know, such a great point made about that probable cause affidavit, because that's where the details are. That's the first peek in getting some insight into what type of evidence investigators gathered and prosecutors have in Idaho. But he doesn't get to see that until he gets to Idaho. I mean, it's not just about the public getting to see it. It's the defendant himself will not know or understand how or why he was arrested until he gets to Idaho. So he may be in a rush there, because we think of this guy and his background. This is what he has studied. This is what he's made his sort of life. Unbelievable. So let's talk about his arrest. This all took place in Pennsylvania. It caught a lot of people by surprise, because we know that this quadruple murder took place 2,500 miles away.
Vinny, I remember how shocked we were last week when we were breaking this news on our air and realizing that this was happening in a city that was completely off of our radar in terms of where they might find a suspect. But this happened at his parents' house. It's something we learned today in a press conference from the Pennsylvania State Police, that they had to force their way into this home, that they broke windows going in. We have some aerial shots of this neighborhood, the Indian Mountain Lake community. It's private and gated. We tried to approach it yesterday just to see if we could get a sense of where this all happened, but you can't get in. Security threw us off of the property almost immediately. It's a community that neighbors around here say was very quiet, that not much happened here, and that this is a resort area. This is a place that people come to relax and to get away, not a place they would expect such attention on such a heinous crime that happened on the other side of the country. I do want to read a statement from the parents that were the ones who lived there, where Bryan Kohberger was home for the holidays after completing that semester in Idaho, in Washington State rather. And they said that we continue to let the legal process unfold. And as a family, we will love and support our son and brother. We have fully cooperated with law enforcement agencies and attempt to seek the truth and promote his presumption of innocence rather than judge unknown facts and make erroneous assumptions. And there was a lot of emotion from them today inside of that courtroom watching this. They just look heartbroken.
Were any more details released about, taking him into custody? They had to break windows and break into the home. Were they not answering the door? Did they want to take him by surprise? Was there any sort of other information revealed about that?
Well, this happened at, we understand, around 3 o'clock in the morning, really early in the morning, that they wanted to make sure that they apprehended him, and they had 3 different types of search warrants, one for the house, one for the actual person of Bryan Kohberger, where they would be getting his DNA. We know DNA is a big part that we will likely see in that probable cause affidavit, but also that they wanted to be able to look at the car, the Elantra that they were able to find. So it likely would be because he completely left that they decided this was the best way to find him, because he's 2,500 miles away from where this incident happened.
So, Julie, when I think of this defendant, it seems that a big part, if not most of his life, is in Pennsylvania. And he was just going to school in Washington State on the border of Idaho. So the story of who this guy is and what he's about would mostly be told, I would think, by people in and around the state of Pennsylvania, where he grew up, where he went to school, and he went to high school and college in Pennsylvania, correct?
He did. He went to high school here at Pleasant Valley High School, and then about a decade later, he went to work there as a school security officer until he was replaced last year. No explanation given from the school as to why he was replaced, but he was actually acting as a law officer on that property, or as a guard. We also know that he graduated from DeSales University, which is about 45 minutes away from where we are here in Stroudsburg. He got his bachelor's there in psychology, but also his master's in criminal justice. And there's a study that's really raised a lot of red flags for people who are following this case closely in terms of what he was studying and how far it was going. He was calling for participants, or someone with his name was calling for participants who was a student at DeSales University. They would not confirm or deny if he was in fact carrying out this study, but we were able to find an archived internet page that was actually on the official website for that university, and it's asking for people to detail their most recent criminal offense and to list whether they were caught or not. And in the event that they were not charged or convicted, it says we will still allow you to participate in the research. So giving us an idea of what he may have been researching and who he may have been in communication with when he was getting that degree.
That's and that could be another part of the story. And we heard from investigators. We want to find out more about this guy, Well, you've got teams of journalists like you scouring information, and obviously investigators gathering as much background as possible to try to figure out, why and who exactly is this guy. Because ultimately, if you bring him to trial, you've got to tell the jury a story. You've got to tell them about who he is and why he did this. And it's such a significant part of it. How about the folks where you've just kind of been running into in this very small community in Pennsylvania? I mean, they've got to be as shocked as the folks were out in Moscow when all this happened.
So surprised, Vinny. Just surprised at the attention that is now on their town. They had heard, many of the people we've talked to, they'd heard of what happened in Idaho, but had no indication that that kind of attention or that a suspect could be here. The ones that we've talked to didn't know him, but they know people who knew him, people who went to school with him, because it isn't very far that we're talking about where his high school would be, where his college would be. Here's a listen to one man that we spoke to today who was caught off guard as well by how many people were here interested in this case.
It's just surprising that, we shop, we go to the stores here, and this person was among us. So it's kind of eye-opening. to know that this person was living among us, and anything could have happened at any time.
That's the sentiment that we heard from a lot of people out here who are taking in this news, but also very much unsettled by the attention that has really disrupted the area. But that disruption should be over at this point once that transport happens.
Absolutely. Julia Cheney in Monroe County, Pennsylvania, really the site of the story, first time inside that courtroom for the now accused quadruple murderer. Julia, thanks so much. We'll speak a little bit later on. We're going to bring Chanley Painter in just a moment. Also, coming up next hour. On the docket tonight in the Low Country of South Carolina, the first huge trial of 2023. Countdown to the Murdaugh family murder trial. Alec Murdaugh, accused of gunning down his wife and son, will be on trial in just 20 days, and court TV cameras will be inside the courtroom.
Your Honor, he has had a tremendous opioid addiction. The death of his wife and son have put him over the edge in terms of that addiction, and that is why one of the major reasons he's considering having himself killed.
You saw a pair of breasts, which looked a lot like your own.
Yes.
Jade Jenks, accused of killing her stepfather. The alleged motive, she came across pictures of herself without any clothes.
Jade Jenks would have never heard it. This wasn't no accident. She buried him under that pile of trash. Did you want to kill him? No.
The Taboo Photos murder trial. Weekday mornings at 9/8 Central on Court TV.
Take a look, folks. That's body cam footage from December 15th. Behind the wheel, the accused mass murderer, riding shotgun, his father. Unbelievable. Pulled over in Indiana, December 15th, 2022. A little more than 2 weeks before being arrested. All right, let's bring in Court TV legal correspondent Chanley Painter, joining us live tonight from Moscow, Idaho. Chanley, great to see you. It's cold out there, I understand. Thank you so much for joining us. We were just looking at that body cam footage. Can you fill in the blanks a little bit? Give us some context and perspective on where that body cam comes from, where they were headed, etc.
Yeah, Bryan Kohberger with his father. So what has been reported is that Kohberger's father flew here to the Pullman, Washington, Moscow, Idaho area to meet his son to make that 2,500-mile trek to Pennsylvania in that white Hyundai Elantra. Along the way, being pulled over at least a couple of times. What we see there, the body cam, one of those times of being pulled over. And Pullman, Washington is where he lived. He has an apartment there. I was there earlier today. It's about 9.3 miles from where I am now in Moscow, Idaho, like a 20-minute drive, Vinny, from where I am, where you would make it to Washington State University campus, those on-campus apartments there. And then from Pullman, Washington, that drive all the way across the country to Albrightsville, Pennsylvania, like I said, 2,546 miles to be exact. Vinny, that takes a while to drive across country, and that's where that body cam video was from that you just played. And again, back at this apartment complex, 20 minutes from where I am, we spoke to several neighbors. We learned that his apartment was Unit 201 on the second floor of Building G, and that his neighbors didn't really remember seeing him a lot. Those that we spoke to, some that did, heard that maybe he would arrive home late at night. The man who lives above him on the third floor told me that he was really relieved that there was finally arrest of this suspect, but terrified that it was someone who lived so close to him. We also caught up with a man who lives there, and these are apartment buildings where families, graduate student families lived. It's a friendly area. There's children playing out in the yards, Vinny. Grant Harris is one of those who has children living there, and he spoke to us about his reaction to living so close to this alleged killer. Let's watch.
Never remember seeing him at any time, so I know a few people that live in G that also never saw him, but I think the lady just downstairs would see him come in late at night. I think that's the only person that I've heard of that, saw him more regularly.
And of course, another neighbor told me that he remembers Vinny seeing that white Hyundai Elantra parked right there out front of that apartment building, and makes me think maybe one of those neighbors, because the police were, asking for anyone with tips of this white Hyundai Elantra to call in, that possibly that's how they learned and connected that vehicle to him.
Absolutely. Now, interesting that one of the neighbors talking about him coming in or coming home late at night. I'm wondering, how much time was spent, if in fact he's the killer, allegedly stalking these victims and kind of getting the lay of the land, figuring out their habits, where they go, when they go to sleep, who's in what room, all things that if you were where you were for several weeks, someone could learn just by going there night after night after night.
Absolutely, and that's something that has been reported a bit. Other networks about allegedly Bryan Kohberger had been following or stalking or going to the same places that some of these victims were in the days and weeks leading up to their deaths. I did speak with the Gonsalves family attorney, Vinny, and he, I asked, is there a link? Does the family know of any link to Bryan Kohberger? And he said they're actively trying to find some sort of a link. They said that they are looking for that connection, but hadn't at that time found anything direct linking Kaylee, at least, to Bryan Kohberger.
I can't imagine they're running in the same circles. I just can't imagine that. So you're at the jail tonight. Explain to us where you are and what we expect to happen there.
Yeah, this is the Latah County Jail, where there's media from all over the world here on standby, because now that Bryan Kohberger waived his extradition hearing, he's expected to be transported here to this county jail, where he will be housed as he will make his initial appearance at some point and then move forward with the preliminary hearing. I actually caught up exclusively with the sheriff here at Latah County about that process. Let's watch.
He'll be housed in a separate cell. We'll have some extra security. That's what a lot of the questions are. He's not guilty, right? Until he goes through court and everything. So he's, he's going to be in my jail, but he's not going to be, treated any different than anybody else in my jail.
He says that, of course, the defendant, I guess you would call him Kohberger, the defendant, will have, treated like everyone else. 3 meals a day. He'll be able to talk to family, have visitors, send mail, but he will not be a part of that general population. Vinny, he will be kept separate the entire time, his own cell by himself, and they are increasing security for this high-profile defendant. The sheriff saying they've never had anything like this type of high-profile case here, and they're doing everything they can to prepare for that. He did not know when Kohberger would be a new resident here yet, but they are making preparations.
And I bet if he did know, he wouldn't tell anyone. I mean, it kind of like the way they did in court today, where nobody knew exactly when or how he was going to be brought in, but they brought him in. Let's talk a little bit about this defendant. He was a teaching assistant at Washington State University, had to have a lot of interaction with students and other professors, I would think.
Absolutely. Now, he was only here in the state for 1 semester. He just completed his first semester as a PhD graduate student in criminology, in criminal justice, but he, as part of that program, was a teaching assistant. So he taught several Washington State University students, and many have been speaking out about their experience as one of his students. Let's take a listen to one who talked about the demeanor, behavior of Kohberger before and after the murders.
He was pretty strict as far as grading goes. When he came into class, he was very, not super mentally present. He would stand up at the front, look at the ground, He had a lot of like boilerplate responses he would give people rather than, maybe something he had thought up on the spot. It seemed like he would be, he'd come in knowing what he was going to say to like most interactions. And then when he would grade your papers, he would be grading you on what he ended up calling like a higher standard. But what it really felt like to us was he was grading us like he would have graded himself as a PhD student. And so that was just kind of like, we were all annoyed by him. And so I knew his name, I knew like, oh, T.A. Bryan, like he sucks at this. Like he's grading us too harshly. And that was like an annoyance. But obviously beyond that, we just thought he was a little weird and kind of, a bad grader. It would have been about a month before winter break when like the murders happened. And we didn't obviously build our framework for this around that because we had no reason to connect him to that, at the time. But definitely around then, he started grading everybody just 100s, not like you pretty much, if you turned something in, you were getting high marks, and he stopped leaving notes. It was just, he seemed preoccupied is what I would have said at the time. And now obviously he seems like he was probably pretty preoccupied.
Yeah, it seems interesting now that students and fellow classmates of the suspect here, looking back and maybe what they remember around the times of the murders and maybe putting those pieces together, making a little more sense now if in fact he is the one. But, some of his classmates spoke out too, how he just seemed disconnected, tired, not as engaged as he did finish the semester at Washington State University, Vinny.
Absolutely. It's just fascinating, right? You look at the behavior. I mean, this is the thing that he was studying, right? The behavior of criminals, how they act. Well, now everyone is studying his behaviors to see, is he in fact a criminal, and is this consistent? This is very, very revealing. Let's talk about the family attorney again, for Kaylee's family's attorney. You did speak with the attorney, and how are they, and how is all that going for them?
Yeah, Shannon Gray represents the family of Kaylee Gonsalves, the Gonsalves family hiring him after expressing some frustration in the investigation that they weren't being communicated enough with. And so Shannon told us that he really took on that role of communicating for the Gonsalves family with police. He told us that he calls the investigators every day for updates on behalf of the Gonsalves family. He says that they're doing as well as they can be. They are so relieved to have an arrest in this case, but they're also preparing themselves moving forward for what is a long road of justice. And they're like all of us looking forward to seeing what the prosecution has against Bryan Kohberger. But let's listen to Shannon Gray, the attorney, talk about how this case has grown personal even to him.
I mean, it's always personal. I mean, when I represent clients, I think any attorney who deals in this area of law, if you're a good one, you get attached to the facts of the case, you get attached to your clients, whether it be a defense or a prosecution, you get attached to those people because you're the voice for them a lot of times in court and things like that. And if you're not attached and you're not connected, then you're not doing your job. So yes, I mean, I'm just as personally involved with the family as I can be, and we're a team and we work together.
I went on to ask the attorney what he felt broke this case, Vinny, and he said that the public's help, the community coming forward after the police put out their requests for tips and information, and especially after they put out the need to know about this white Hyundai Elantra spotted at the crime scene around the time of the murders. He said that the community, he gives credit to them as helping the investigators really break open this case and leading to the arrest.
Absolutely, and it's so great to see that the family has someone to help guide them through what's going to be, again, we said it at the beginning of the show, a very long and difficult journey. Chanley Painter live in Moscow tonight. Thank you so much. I know we're going to be speaking again a little bit later on, so hopefully you can warm up a little bit. Thanks so much, Chanley. When we come back, we're going to bring in our investigators to get a little bit of a context, perspective on what we have learned about this accused killer and how he was taken into custody.
Me too. detectives arrested 28-year-old
Bryan Kohberger.
Now I look on my phone and I see the guy's name and I see the picture and I'm thinking, that looks a lot like my TA who's also named Bryan, but that would be crazy.
He is very intelligent. In my hour conversation with him, that comes off. I can tell that, and he understands where we are right now.
Every tip matters. Everything, every piece matters. So we just want, our community and the nation to continue to send us that.
He's in custody, waived extradition, and next stop, Idaho, a courtroom. Welcome back, folks. I want to bring our guests in. We got some great guests tonight. Joining me in Los Angeles, California, retired FBI Special Agent Bobby Chacon. And we're trying to get Mike King. I think we just lost him for a second. So, Bobby, I've got you. This guy, he's a 28-year-old grad student, Washington State, studying for his PhD, teacher's assistant in criminal justice and criminology department. What are your thoughts about this guy, this profile?
Well, I don't put a whole lot of faith in profiles, but Vinny, the fact that people should remember that he wasn't studying forensic science. That's different. It's a whole different field. It's an applied science. He was studying criminology, and through my 30 years in investigations, I ran across a lot of criminologists and criminology people and forensic psychologists, and they're very good at the academics of it. But when it comes to carrying out a murder, I don't think anybody should apply special skills or special thoughts to this guy simply because he was studying that in school, out of books and in classrooms. He was reaching out to criminals to do his PhD research, which is quite common. To get a PhD, you have to do a lot of research. And that kind of research is done routinely. Those people are contacted all the time. Some of the questions he was sending to them were right out of the psychopath checklist that we have that the FBI has. You can find it online. But I mean, look, I don't see him as a criminal mastermind. Certainly, if he's arrested 6 weeks after he commits a crime of this magnitude, he obviously was not a criminal mastermind. He drove his own car to the crime scene. He probably had his own phone. He left his DNA behind. There's nothing about this crime that tells me he was a sophisticated criminal.
How about the fact that he's devoted his life and getting all these extra degrees as well in studying the criminal mind? Is it possible that he became his own subject?
Yeah, or the other way around, or he was so fascinated with this that he was destined to start researching it because, it's the cart before the horse. Was he a killer that was, drawn to this field of study, or did it being in this field of study kind of steer him towards being a criminal? I don't know, but I certainly think you're right. There's a connection between that and the act he carried out. But he didn't do it very well. But I think you're right. I think his fascination now, we see his fascination with this was more than academic. Some people are just fascinated with killers and serial killers. They write books, they do a lot of research, and that's great. We learn a lot from people like that. But this guy's obsession with it doesn't seem academic. It seems like it was more practical.
And joining us now by phone in Salt Lake City, Utah, retired police commander, host of the Profiling Evil podcast, Mike King. Mike, I'm glad we were able to connect here. Your thoughts, your reaction to the suspect who's been arrested for this quadruple homicide in Idaho?
I'm going to bounce right off of what Bobby's saying here, this idea that was he a killer before this started and he fantasized about it and he worked through this process, followed these kids around? Or as he went through this process of studying serial killers, did he start to become one who fantasized about it? And I don't know that it really matters. The thing that's really important, I think, in this case, and I go back to the first week we talked on this show, Vinny, where we talked about that victim selection process and that police were originally saying, hey, this is a targeted event. And that got everybody spun up that this is somebody that's known to these victims. That's not necessarily the case when you're talking about these kinds of violent homicides. That doesn't mean, though, that the offender didn't know who the victim was going to be and could have done a great deal of pre-planning. But I don't think these kids knew who this person was, if, in fact, he is the killer.
Yeah, if, in fact, he's the killer, right? He knew them, but they may not have known him. I want you to take a listen here to Major Christopher Paris here talking about the arrest.
Can you give any insight insight into why you all decided to go in overnight to make the arrest?
Those are tactical decisions in terms of base surveillance. I don't want to give out too many tactical factors that go into that situation, but obviously surveillance was conducted, and we wanted to go in at a time when we thought it would be the safest for everybody, safest for anybody else in the house, safest for Mr. Kohberger, and safest for our people.
All right, let's talk about the arrest here. He mentioned surveillance. Our understanding, and we're hearing that there may have been under surveillance for days here, for days before he was arrested. Mike, I'll have you go first on this. If you've got someone you believe is a potential mass murderer, you think he's the one that did it, how important is the surveillance to make sure he doesn't strike again? There's a lot of pressure on investigators.
Yeah, I mean, this thing is crazy, Vinny. 9 miles away. If law enforcement didn't know who he was, why weren't people in that community reporting that vehicle sitting there? But then I'm really interested in, why does Dad jump on a plane and fly over to Washington and join his son driving back? If they want him home for the holidays, put him on a plane, fly him home and back. I mean, was it all part of just the fact that sometimes parents know when their kids are getting a little off base and they need a little one-on-one time to try to level out the playing field with them? Or was it that the dad knew that there was something with that vehicle and we got to get it out of there and back where we can hide it in the house? And I'm certainly not casting stones in any of those, but these are the questions that start coming up, because law enforcement, I got a sense, didn't really know he was on the radar until he started that drive. And it may have come in Indiana when he got pulled over twice, and all of a sudden somebody thought, holy cow, we've been looking for a white Hyundai.
Mike King, Bobby Chacon, appreciate your time tonight. We're going to be talking a lot about this case. Thanks so much.